Welcome to CX&Chill, the real, raw customer experience podcast from Exo Studios and ExtendOps. Today, your host Stephanie Todd interviews Tina Selwyn, UX CX expert for Martellus Consulting. Listen in as Tina shares CX stories from the front lines of the financial industry, discusses designing customer-centric UX, and finding CX inspiration in all different industries. Enjoy.
There was a study, I'm not going to quote it correctly, but basically there was a study that people were happier with limited choices. So they went into a store and had like 50 cereal brands to choose from. They were less happy than the ones that walked into a store that only had 5. Yeah. So from a customer perspective, we may think it is the best thing to do to give them every option we have available. Yeah. They actually don't want that. It does not make them happy. Yeah, because ultimately your customer, in a very basic sense, your customer is a customer of many things. Yep. And they're going to compare their experience online, their experience in the doctor, et cetera. And we've just seen industries are getting blown up because they got lazy. Yep. Doctors, that's going to happen to them.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to CX&Chill. I'm Stephanie Todd, your host, and I'm here today with Tina Selwyn. And super excited to have her on, bringing insights from decades, we won't age ourselves, of experience. To really give a new insight into CX. Happy to have you here.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. I'm looking at these beautiful boats in Puerto Vallarta. It's beautiful.
I know. I was distracted earlier, so I'm glad I'm faced this way now because at first the
paraglider
was out, and I'm like, okay. Very quickly to get distracted. Anyway, so excited to have you here. One of the first things I want to do is just ask, what is something no one knows, or maybe a select few people know that maybe some of the clients you work with would be surprised to hear?
Okay, and that I want out in the world. Okay.
All right. Well, it's a very informal podcast, so we're open to hear all of it.
Okay. So besides my passion for CX, obviously, one of the things that usually surprises people is that I did fly in trapeze for many, many years when I lived in New York City and loved it. I even went to trapeze camp. Up in Vermont.
I didn't know there was a trapeze camp.
There is. And I decided after seeing all of the very young people who were doing it that I was never going to make a career out of this. And so riding back on the subway with my hands all bandaged up, I was like, love it, but maybe not the career for me.
So I'm just curious. Yeah. I know we'll get into more CX topics, but how did you, what got you interested? Did you visit a circus or a Soleil act or whatever? How did you jump into, unintended trapeze?
I flew in trapeze.
Right.
So it was on the Hudson. So there's a trapeze school that was right on Hudson.
Okay.
And I worked in the financial district. And so I walked past it all the time, and you could see people flying and catching and all of that. And it looked like so much fun. So I tried it. And I just fell in love and, gotten to the point of where I could flip and get caught and all that. It was great.
So now that brought you exactly into customer experience because it's basically the same thing. It's I'm going to try to fly and hopefully not hit the ground.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm going to listen to my body.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. So then what did bring you into CX? How did you make that transition? I always joke that no one said, I want to go work in call centers or in the contact center or customer experience industry, but we all jump into it. And then there's so many problems and things to solve and it's fun. But how did you get started?
So I think the biggest part is that I was doing CX before I knew I was doing CX, before it became a branded name, right? So my biggest thing was I was trying to fix problems for customers. And so I worked in finance and credit card, American Express. And I would run into these situations of where there was just friction in the system and I couldn't figure out why. And I started solving those problems. And as I moved into marketing and into more customer facing roles, I had the ability to actually fix them. And so when that happened, I realized how much we were moving to digital. And as we were talking about before, I became a UX certified person through General Assembly because I really wanted to understand how the digital experiences could help customers. And so we got really deep into, how to design things, how to actually, draw it out and make it work for customers and do customer research. And then I brought that back to American Express. And as I continued to evolve in that role, in the different roles that I had over 10 years, I just used it more and more. And so at that point, I was pretty much doing CX, but I also had the UX background as well.
Yeah. And so for listeners who maybe don't have as much familiarity, I mean, we talk about customer experience a lot on the podcast, but what about like UX? I think it's a rare infusion or synergy you have where you bring the UX and CX components together. Do you want to just talk a little bit about UX and then how that really is applied to CX for people who maybe don't have familiarity with it?
Yeah, for sure. So UX is the actual technical aspect of digital CX.
Okay.
So that's how I would explain it. So it tells you can actually like move the button, you can design a page, you can build an app, you can actually do the actual technical work that you can then hand over to engineering. In my roles from a CX perspective, it is usually partnering really closely with UX to make sure that what they're building meets the customer needs. So if you think about it from a CX perspective, I always think that I'm representing the customer, whereas UX, I'm interpreting that into something real.
Sure. Yeah. And it's really, if I'm using, let's just say a digital app for one of my brands that I am a consumer of, it's how are they using that? What buttons appear? How do I go through the product and services that I am a consumer or customer of?
Yeah, exactly. And a good example would be US Bank. So US Bank was trying to really evolve their app, and I was the SVP of customer experience over credit cards. Now, obviously their app deals with banking, it deals with credit cards and mortgages and all that stuff, right? And so I was coming to the table to say, but this is important for credit cards, right? So we only have a limited amount of space. I was advocating for our customers in that space. And so even if you think about a menu and how things are prioritized within that menu, everybody's trying to do something with that real estate. And that's what CX can do, is that UX built the opportunity to do it. And then from a business perspective and a customer perspective, you can make sure that your customers are getting what they need.
Yeah, because from the customer lens, I don't really care about the silos in the business. I have maybe a credit card, maybe a mortgage, maybe whatever those products are. But how does that work in terms of prioritization and like credit cards more important than this or that in terms like were there boardroom brawls? Like how did you say like, no, credit cards are like, this is number one?
It was usually a negotiation, right? As well as testing. So, putting in some really good A/B test or, let's try this and see if it works. And we had really good partnerships, right? So everybody was trying to serve the customer, depending on who the customer was, right? Ideally, what I'd love to see is down the road of where I am a customer that does 3 out of 5 things. That is a personalized experience within that app. I don't need to see the other stuff. Unless you're trying to sell me something. So I think that right now we're in an example of it's everything to everyone. And so then it causes a lot of friction. And we can get to the place, hopefully soon, to where it can be much more personalized.
Yeah. I mean, even when I'm doing some things, like I had like a Cobra when I left my last company. And when I was online for health insurance, I had asked them a question about my policy and they're like, well, we don't know, like go to that company or go do this. And to even get to where I needed to go, everyone was telling me, no, that's a different product or that's a different group. And, I know we've talked about this before, but it's how do you make sure as a customer, they've been understood to know what their journeys are, to even know what to serve them. So how do you do that with some of the clients that you consult with and, hey, here's what I'm trying to help you fix or solve.
Right.
If not all of them are always also understanding what needs to be solved.
Well, I think, how I always address things is going back to what are you actually trying to do, right? And usually it comes back to making money. And you make money by making customers happy, right? And so if you can figure out, it comes down to business decisions, right? We've got a whole pie and this is how we can attack it. I think I'm losing the thread.
It's making me hungry.
No, the pie.
We have a pie, and I'm like, which kind? What kind is your favorite pie?
Chocolate.
Like, right? And does cheesecake count as a pie, or is that a different kind of dessert?
So, but what I would say about that is that, so there are a lot of bright and shiny objects, right? And you get different companies that really want to focus on the bright and shiny, like you had mentioned, like chat, right? People love chat. They love the idea of chat, right?
Like I want chat on my website. I'm like, why?
Right. Why do you
what
actually want it? What are you trying to solve for it? So bringing people through that is really a lot of, I think, what CX professionals do, because then you bring it back to, okay, you want to make money. You want more customers. You need customers to be happy. And this is how they want to engage with you. build that,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's pointing them in the right direction. The shiny objects are tricky, and we talked on the panel earlier about how, take a risk,
Mm-hmm.
and all that, and that is fine.
Yep.
But what I find in companies is that you can get the majority of the benefits of just fixing the basic needs of a customer.
Mhm.
They don't care about the shiny object.
Yeah.
They just want to be able to do what they want to do,
Mm-hmm.
digitally, on the phone, whatever.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think too many times we are trying to give them some crazy experience when I just want to know what my balance is, or like just very basic things
Yeah.
where they're like, okay, that's really cool that you have glitter and you're doing this and this and this, and it's very exciting. But at the end of the day, I'm a customer of yours for these purposes, and I just don't want to have the friction to even have to have the conversation with you, because I want to be able to use your products or services without having to do that.
Right.
But and I think something that you talked about too, so you've gone across various industries. So you've had some heavily regulated, financial, and then you get into some of the grocery and in those areas.
Yeah.
Do you find that there's similarity between the wants and needs of what the business is like, especially focusing on going digital? Do they all kind of have the same 10 buckets of things, or is it very different based on industry?
It's interesting because I think it depends on how mature the industry is, right? Mm-hmm. So the financial industry is extremely mature. Yeah. Within that group, I've worked with Citibank, US Bank, American Express, like a variety of different companies. Yeah. And their culture bleeds through to how they think about digital, right? And so you have somebody like American Express, which is so customer focused. And so they're making sure that your needs are met. Yeah. You've got some other instances of where they're trying to grow their base, or they're trying to cross-sell, et cetera. And that kind of gums up the works a little bit, because it's not a clear message to the customer. It's like, oh, we'll show you how to apply for a card, but let us tell you these 5 other things that you need to do first.
Sure.
Customers don't want that, right? Yeah. Across industries, it is really interesting because like the grocery industry is massively changing right now, right? So before COVID, e-commerce sales were nothing, right? Amazon was getting into Whole Foods. That was interesting, of what they were doing and some of their innovation there. But when you think about the grocery business, and they're trying now after COVID to push people to go online, they're trying a lot of different things. And what they're trying to do is to give customers what they think they want, change behaviors, as well as still make money. And that is hard. Yeah. Right. Like you see that, one of the stores down the street was like, you can get a monthly membership for $20 and get all of your groceries, delivered within an hour. Yeah. Right. Do customers actually need that? That's only 1 block away from me. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I think they're still trying to figure out the need, especially with COVID, because things shifted so much. And is there a need for that much innovation in a customer experience? Or do we just really need to make sure that you have the freshest products?
Yeah. Well, and it's also understanding maybe there's certain products or SKUs that are generally, if people are ordering this, it's kind of an urgent need versus something else. And I always joke that on Amazon, I'll order something and it will be sent to me by like 3 or 4 a.m. And I'm like, I really don't need, like,
it wasn't better.
Like, I really don't need this this fast. Yeah. Like, where you need to deliver it to me at 3 or 4. And I'm sure they've done the business modeling to understand maybe they can pay drivers differently, or they can get more stuff, like more drivers out there to be more efficient at different times than, busier times. But I always laugh because I'm like, no, this very urgent thing, I'd much rather have delivered faster, but also you could probably give it to me in a week. And as much as I love to get things that I need fast, I also have things where I don't necessarily need to have things delivered that fast, and it shouldn't. And sometimes I can't choose that. Yeah, like it is like you either get it at 4 a.m. and they're freaking me out because I'm like, who is at my house at 4 a.m.? I've seen a meme that actually talks about on Amazon now. They're like, oh, I must have Amazon Prime because I ordered pajamas and when I woke up I was in them. Like, because you're like, they've gotten to a service now where they're basically putting them on me. Well, that's a joke. Just
Well, and the Amazon example is a really good one, right? Is that they're trying that bundled approach of like everything gets delivered on Tuesday. Yeah. It's interesting though, because like in the example you just gave and the examples that I have, I haven't been able to bundle it like that because it's not relevant to me. Like some things are fine coming on Tuesday, but other ones, like I do need it now. So I think that, logistically that causes a huge problem. Yeah. But it's really interesting just that, especially post-COVID, right? Of how we changed, and companies are diving into that change, and people are kind of changing back a little bit.
Yeah.
Right?
I call it customer amnesia.
Yeah.
You know, I think over the course of time, you see these big trends happen or these big monumental shifts. And then all of a sudden it's like 1, 2, 3 years later. And we're like, we'll wait till that spikes up again.
Yeah.
But I mean, for me, I used to go to the grocery store and I would listen to music and I would take my time and I would put all the things in my cart. I don't know the amount of hours I spent at the grocery store were probably the most ridiculous thing. Anyways, but now I just do my online order. Yeah. I go and pick it up. So I sit outside, they put it in my car and it's awesome. There are still mistakes because I have special dietary needs. So there's still times where I'm like, ooh, they got the wrong one. Yeah. But they've even made it where it's a lot more efficient for them. And I don't know, like some things I don't think I can go back. To like, I don't think I could actually go unless I have very specific product needs where I go in and get them and get out. Right. I'm 100% doing the drive up and pick up orders as much as possible.
But what if the insight was, I'm making it up at this point, but what if the insight was people don't want to go grocery shopping anymore, but they would like to go to a place where they could drop off their dry cleaning, things you can't, you know, like you can't do that. Like you can get them pick up, I guess, but like do these other things, like it becomes more of a community area. Like, is there a way that an industry such as grocery that is so old doesn't need to 100% shift? Yeah. They can offer different solutions. Because like one of the things that you hear about the pickers is that, and those are people who are actually picking the stuff, is that
they should get a better name for that, because I don't think I'd want to say like I'm a picker, because that to me just is like noses and wedgies. Yeah. Like it's like they're poor guy. Like they need, like customer service went through this change where it was like ninjas. Like we should. That's our biggest priority right now. Let's come up with a new name.
A new name. Okay, we'll do that.
Okay, but for now, let's go back to what you're saying.
But you're asking a human to do something, and have some intuition of what like a substitution would be. Yeah. So you order Cheerios, no Cheerios. What's that next thing that you should get? And what happens currently is that, I mean, in most cases, they either don't give you anything or they substitute something that's not the same.
Or I get a million text messages.
Or you get a million text messages.
And they're trying to be nice. Right. But I'm also like, I really don't, I'm busy. And that sounds terribly rude.
No, but it's not. Yeah. It's like, it's their job. They want to do it well. They also don't want to take a long time to do it. So it's all these competing factors. So going back to the original question is like, in different maturity levels, you see totally different needs. And I see right now that the retail industry in general is swinging, trying to figure out where to land, and they will land someplace. But it's just going to be really important to, keep an eye on the prize of,
But like you're saying, it could be a hub of still engaging and bringing customers back together. And maybe they do like a little cooking show in the store where you can learn how to make the dinner and you can buy all the ingredients for that dinner for that night. Yep. Like things like that. I'm just spitballing, but you're right. I mean, I have certain things every week I do, right? I pick up the dog food or certain things I have to buy. And if I could go to one place to do that, it'd be so much better. But then it's also understanding different customers have different needs. And can you find a larger group of customers who have kind of the similar or same needs, or maybe things they don't know they need yet? Yeah. And then figure out whether it's dry cleaning or mailing all my Amazon packages back or whatever it is, going to one place. And I do find that I go to the grocery store closest to me. It's not the closest one, but the one that has all those other aspects. I go to that one because then I can knock out the 2 or 3 things I have to do.
Well, or you think, so that's one thing that you're making it more convenient, right? Yep. The other one is that you can diversify, right? And do something different. So Petco is based in San Diego, and I love them because we get to see all of the innovation that's coming through. So they've recognized that people don't want as much waste from their pet food. And so now they've got refillable things.
Oh, cool.
Right? And so now if I'm like, I don't want to waste, the shipping or, the packaging or whatever, I can just go into Petco with my container, fill it up, pay for it. Right. Yeah. So you've identified something that is not necessarily easier, but it aligns with my goals and my morals. Right. Yeah. And so there's different ways of doing things like that. Like what if a grocery store was like, if you come in, we will give you the best vegetables.
Yeah. Cause that is my biggest complaint with pickers. Yeah. Is that usually the fruit and vegetables, I'm super picky. about it. I'm super picky, but then they'll choose ones where I'm like, oh, this one's bruised. I wouldn't have chosen that fruit.
Yeah.
And then the poor fruit probably all feels like it's, all inadequate, but whatever. I think it's just something where trying to figure out those little nuances that I will never probably tell the business I'm working with what bothers me or why I go away or why I might do something different. But it's one of those things where I think sometimes the quiet customers are the ones you want to try to get in front of so you can understand what is it that they're not buying as much or they would buy more if you understood some of the things that maybe they go away from just because like I go to Trader Joe's now to get my produce. Yeah. Just because I'm like, oh, it's better if I just go pick it out too. Yeah. Plus Trader Joe's like I have no idea where they find those people.
They're so nice.
But I'm always, like, I know all of them. And they're always like, oh, how's it go? Like the most personal conversations in checkout lines. It brings back the North Dakota in me where I'm like, oh, usually people look at me like, why is she asking what I'm making based on what's in my grocery cart? Yeah. And Trader Joe's, they're like, ooh, what you got going on? Yeah. I'm like, okay, these are my people.
Oh, so, Texas too. I get it. But what was I going to say about the Trader Joe's thing? They're offering something unique, right? A service that's unique. Like I actually get joy going into Trader Joe's. Yeah. Not only is it unique products, but it's really friendly people. Like it's not, I don't consider that like a bad thing going in. No. I was gonna
and I'm not sponsored or we do not actually make money. If Trader Joe's wants to kick in some money for the podcast,
be awesome.
That would be great. But I think kind of just going back to what you're saying, like being able to offer something unique, something that either makes your life easier, but even the example you gave with Petco, I mean, you have five dogs,
2 dogs, 3 cats.
2 dogs, 3 cats. Okay. So you visit Petco a lot. Yeah. And so that's something that whether or not it brings you joy, but it makes you at least feel in line with your belief system because you want to be more sustainable or better to the environment. Yep. And also care for all of your fur puppies and kitties.
I mean, they even have a full kitchen where they're making fresh food too. Like, I mean, they're doing interesting things. So I would keep an eye out on Petco from at least a customer needs perspective because they are definitely like sniffing around in some really
so many puns.
I didn't even mean to do that one. But the one thing I was going to say is that, so you were saying if you didn't like something, you're the like quiet quitting of, a grocery store or service, right? Yeah. Especially with physical locations, they really struggle with getting that feedback. For instance, if you have an NPS score, you're at the register and you do that little NPS thing. Sure. Do you, is it 1 through 10 on satisfaction, right? Usually you're right in front of a very friendly checker, right? So somebody's checking you out. Yeah. You usually are giving them your score, right? Yeah. And so you're not actually learning anything about the rest of your experience. You're just looking at, Marge, who's always really nice to you, and you're giving it a 10. You might give it a 9 if they didn't have something you wanted, right? So it's really important that you're checking at each critical point to make sure that you're gathering that feedback, or else you get a somewhat bloated and uninformed NPS score at the end.
Yeah. Well, and so you're hitting on something I get on a soapbox about sometimes, so I helped develop a co-product with Bain and Satmetrics to do a joint NPS score when I was at a BPO previously. And Fred is awesome. And he had the vision behind it. And even in 2019, he came out and said, it's not 100%, an NPS is not being used how I intended it to be used, because it was really initially to be a measurement on customer purchasing and loyalty and buyback. Like, are they going to come back? Yeah. And, that was really the focus. And now we have so much focus on NPS in like various ways, but you're right. To me, it's measuring a percentage of customers. Yeah. And then usually for me, I'm either going to speak an opinion if I'm super happy or super mad. Yep. In the middle, I'm not the detractors versus the promoters, and then the neutral. Like if I'm neutral, I'm not going to tell you anything, but I might do the quiet quitting of the brand.
And you're probably not actually neutral.
Yeah. Right. Probably not. But also you're right to the point of, was it the agent? Was it the product? Was it the experience? Was it the shipping? Yeah. Like, it's really hard to get a good measurement of what are you actually saying you're measuring, because maybe it is the happy cashier and it's not that I'm mad that the product did this, or maybe the bags ripped on my way home. Whatever that is, but it's very hard to actually say this measurement is based on that experience, especially some of the times I get surveys or questions way later. Yeah. So if it's not in that moment, like I'll get a hospital or something that will ask me, how was your experience at our clinic? And I'll be like, when did I do this? What was it for? Was it my child? Was it me? Yeah. And is it the scheduling? Was it the actual appointment? Was it how long I spent in the waiting room?
Yeah.
Is it the actual doctor? Like there's so many factors
Yeah.
that can make it a positive or negative experience that I just don't think we really measure, because
Yeah.
we just try to like, okay, it's this number.
Yeah.
And if it's happy, we move on. If it's sad, we're like, okay, what do we need to fix?
Right.
And sometimes those angry letters to the president
Mm-hmm.
are like completely disrupting the CX teams, because
Mhm.
they'll be like,
Oh,
oh my gosh, this is what we have to focus
It's the
on
shiny
today.
object, yeah.
Oh my gosh. And it's
Yeah.
like, wait, there's a lot of things that happen. Is that an anomaly, or is that really what we need to fix, or do we need to focus on something else?
Just because you're the loudest doesn't mean your problem's actually everybody else's problem.
Yeah.
Right? Like I always attack problems with, what are the mass problems?
Yeah.
Right?
Uh-huh.
Who's going to,
Yeah.
what's the biggest complaint for the most people?
Mm-hmm.
And then once you attack that, then you can start, getting more clever about what
Mhm.
you're doing. But going back to what we were talking about before, it's usually fundamentals.
Yeah.
It's not the bright and shiny object.
Well, but and to your point too, is I'm a big, what's the largest percentage of people affected
Yeah.
versus is it the 1%? And if your 1% is your most important customers who have the most buying power, like
Yeah.
that's something
Right.
different. But generally speaking, those people who are the loudest
Mhm.
are getting heard.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I almost wonder, I'm making this up right now, but I wonder if it's like an entitled customer base where they also probably, if they're this loud, maybe they'll also be the fastest to leave.
Maybe.
I don't know. But to me, there's a lot around loyalty.
Mhm.
And I still am not 100% sure the metrics around loyalty and what that actually does for a business in terms of revenue or profit or anything is correlated in a way where I would still fully be able to buy into it.
Loyalty is so tricky, right?
Yeah.
So, that's how I've always determined whether we're doing a good job or not, or are we losing customers, or are they coming back, right? And are they bringing people with them, right? That's ultimately what you want. However, there are so many choices out there.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was talking to a retail company that said, what was it? So if there was more competition, people actually, so if there were like two grocery stores that were near each other,
Mm-hmm.
they actually had better scores, customer satisfaction scores, than if there was only one store.
Yeah.
And that's because they didn't have to try as hard,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if that's the case, you're looking at all of these, competition, right? You can get groceries from Amazon, from Whole Foods, from all these different groceries. Same thing with credit cards, right?
Yep.
Or any kind of service. There's a lot of competition out there. And so I don't know if loyalty, I don't know how it can be measured, to your point. Because people will leave. But that's okay. It could be cyclical.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too is what I've found when I look at the next generation of buyers, right? Who are you right now are using my money, but whatever, my kids. But when I look
They're
at
fickle.
I know, right? And it is what is easy.
Yeah.
It is what is convenient. It
Yeah.
doesn't even make sense because especially it's not their money, so they don't care. They're like DoorDash. I'm like, there's noodles in the fridge, like whatever. But you look at it, and my parents were very true to brands based on what their parents had, whether it's a peanut butter or whatever that is.
Coca-Cola only in our house, no Pepsi.
Yeah. And now I think it's kind of, well, what's convenient or what's easy for me or what has the least amount of friction versus some of that tied ancestry of choices of what made sense for families. And there's some cases where I've seen it where people are very particular because there's some emotional attachment to it. Other than that, it seems like the up and comers are like, if that's hard, I'm moving on and I'll go to the next thing.
Yeah. But then you also think about, from a customer perspective, there was a study, I'm not going to quote it correctly, but basically there was a study that people were happier with that, with limited choices.
Mm-hmm.
So they went into a store and had like 50 cereal brands to choose from. They were less happy than the ones that walked into a store that only had 5.
Yeah.
So from a customer perspective, we may think it is the best thing to do to give them every option we have available.
Yeah.
They actually don't want that. It does not make them happy. And so the more you can put it in, you can do what they need you to do. And then offer them something that is complementary, something personalized, like going back to the personalization thing. Like, I don't need to know how to get a commercial card. Yeah. I would never use that, right? So why are you showing it to me? Yep. It just makes me mad. Mm-hmm. So I think that editing is so important within CX and UX to make sure that you are actually giving customers what they actually want, and you're being more particular about what you're selling to them.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Like if I'm buying a box of cereal, maybe recommend almond milk or cow's milk, whatever it is, or maybe it's, and not selling or recommending, a spatula, because that isn't something that you're going to use for your cereal. But yeah, I mean, it's funny, over Christmas, I got a new pair of boots, and the company I went to had said, oh, here, and they sent me an email and had said, we think that this would look great with your boots. That wasn't the boot I bought. I bought a different boot. I was like, wait, what? I was like, are you trying to tell me something? Or I'm like, do I have so many boots I don't know what's in my closet anymore?
Or did I do something wrong?
Yeah.
Like that's one of the biggest problems I think a lot of companies have, is that, and like, for instance, I ordered something recently and I definitely ordered it.
Yeah.
And got the email that I had ordered it. And then I kept getting the did you forget emails. And I was like, did I forget? And then I went back and checked and I was like, nope, didn't forget. I actually bought it. And then they sent me another one of like, just a reminder, this is still in your cart. And I'm like, did I? And so there's some kind of glitch of they were trying to get me to purchase it so passionately that they didn't actually check to see that I actually purchased it.
Yeah.
And then that made me really unhappy because it made me waste my time.
And you hadn't even gotten the product to experience it yet.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, which has to be hard. And I think when you talk about limited choices too, so there was a study, the medical study done during COVID, where they talked about your cognitive brain, like all of the brain functionality of decision making. And they talked about, prior to COVID, you had like your kind of life where you are in just like coast mode, or you're on autopilot, and you're like, you get in your car, you drive to work, you drop the kids at school, whatever that is that you do on a daily basis. And then with COVID, it was like every day, it was like, do my kids go to school? Yeah. Do I go to work?
Uncertainty, yeah.
There was so much uncertainty that people's brains were having to make so many decisions by 9 a.m. that they normally don't have to make, that now the decisions, like, we don't want to have to make a bunch of decisions.
Yeah. Nope.
And so it's like, limit my decision making of the day. I think it was Steve Jobs who would wear the same outfit all the time. And I'm like, that would make my life so much easier. Yeah. If I was like, just the same t-shirt and pants all day, every day. I still haven't pulled the trigger on that. But I mean, I think people just want simpler choices, and I think simpler lives. A lot of times, like we talk about like, conscious consumerism, and it's, what do I actually need to have versus I want to have? And I look at like my parents, and my mother and her parents had precious moments and all the antiques and knickknacks and all of these things all over her house. And for me, I'm like, I just want the things in front of me that I use. Yep. Right. And so I don't have that attachment to some of the stuff, but I think that some of those previous generations too, and even people my generation, like there's still people who are in our generations who have different things that they're into. Yeah. I mean, trapeze, whatever it is, right? That they really take on, whether it's collectibles or whatever. But I think it's something where I think when I look at my kids, they still want things, but it's not to the level of stuff.
They don't need it.
Unless it's something that they're actually going to be using. Yeah. So.
Well, and you did see the shift from people buying things to experiences, right? So it's going to become more and more important for anybody who's trying to sell anything to make it into an experience. And you've got two options, right? There are some things you don't need to think about, right? Take that off my plate. Groceries, take it off my plate. Yeah. So I can plan my trip, or I can plan this event or something that I'm going to do. Yeah. The one thing I was going to bring up that we haven't talked about before is competition. So within the businesses that I consult for, a lot of times they only look at their own industry. And what I always do is I say, what's the best experience that you've ever had? Yeah. And then tell me those companies. And then I'm going to compare your experiences against them, because I was working within the medical industry, and boy, they need some help, right? And I mean, they were still using paper forms, insurance was really confusing. You never got confirmation about your appointments. You had to wait for a really long time. And I went in and I was like, this is broken. And they're like, but this is how everybody does it. And I was like, for now. Yeah. And so we started looking at some other companies that they found, good experiences, right? So whether it be like an Airbnb or whether those are complicated things. Like Airbnb can be relatively complicated. Yeah. You are communicated well. You have some sort of feedback loop.
Yeah.
Fees are explained now.
Yeah.
Things like that. And so I went back to them and I was like, guys, like you could just put some basic stuff in here to improve it and to improve your customer's experience. And they had never thought about it that way. They're like, this is just how doctors visits are. And speaking of, I need to contact my vet because their new thing is that they remind me of an appointment via text and say text or email or call us. So I always text back, yes. And I get a reply that says, this is an unmonitored line. And I'm like, then why are you texting me? Like if you want an action, if it's informative, fine. Yeah. If you want an action from me.
Yeah. Well, and then it's like,
I'm
if
not
you're going
exactly
to
sure what to do.
Yeah. If you're going to open a new channel, you have to support it too.
Exactly.
Like you have to figure out a way. Yeah. No, but I like that because I know we bring up Amazon a lot. Yeah. But I think they completely changed how customers expect to have experiences because you went from, well, my bank treats me this way, my medical professionals treat me this way, whatever, to now with Amazon, they're like, wait, if it can be this easy, why can't my experience be that way with everyone? And so I think that it's really shifted that instead. You're right, because I think you can't have the companies think the same way as they've always thought, or they're going to be obsolete because younger generations aren't going to tolerate any of that friction. But I do think when you talk about it, I always find it fascinating to try to figure out how to talk to people in a way where they can understand why that's important. But I think the more we can do things where different titles, different industries come together and understand like, oh, that's what's happening. Oh, there's a best practice here. And I think we saw that sometimes with BPOs because they're managing so many different industries and so many different clients that they would apply some of the best practices across. And you're like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's been interesting to see some of those silos getting broken down, which is one of the things we're trying to do with the podcast, right? Is to try to have people share some of it where maybe they're in a different industry and never thought about how that could be applied to how they manage their customers.
Yeah. Because I mean, ultimately, your customer, I mean, in a very basic sense, your customer is a customer of many things.
Yeah.
And they're going to compare their experience online, their experience at the doctor, et cetera. And we've just seen industries are getting blown up because they got lazy.
Yeah.
Doctors, that's going to happen to them.
Yeah.
Taxis, almost obsolete at this point. They used to be stinky. They were expensive. They were hard to find sometimes, rude at times, et cetera. Because you couldn't rate them. You couldn't do that kind of thing. Now taxis, God love them. They are struggling.
Yeah. Well, and now I can okay, I'm going to give you the best example. And I don't remember if it was Uber or Lyft, but I got in one and he had karaoke in the car. And I'm also not going to say who it is because he also had mini bottles of booze. I was like, what kind of ride share is this? This is amazing. So I was like, I'm pretty sure this is illegal, but it's awesome. But we were going to a concert, so it made sense. But he had lights in his car. He had a karaoke machine. So we're tapped in. We're doing karaoke on our drive. He made it a fun experience. I would rate him 5 stars out of 5 stars every time. I'm not going to tell them always why because, he'd probably get in trouble. But elevating that experience where you're right. When I'd be in New York City, I have a potentially smelly, dirty cab I'm in, and the driver is more angry that I'm in there than happy.
Yeah.
And so it's how do you continue to help the people who are in front of your customers strive to give a great experience because they care and because they're probably measured on it.
Yeah. Well, and on the flip side, right? Maybe the reason why the cab drivers were not cleaning their car, were unhappy and rude was because they had no feedback loop to be able to say this customer's a jerk, right? Yeah. Whereas I was in New Orleans a month ago or whatever.
Yeah.
We're driving around, it's before Mardi Gras, a couple weeks, and driving around in a Lyft, and there is, I think it's a $250 or $300 fee if someone gets sick in their car. And I was like, that's going to make you feel better about your job, right? Nobody wants anybody to, have a problem in the car. However, if you actually are going to get paid to clean it and all of that, that's a lot better than a taxi driver, right? Who's just stuck going to, a gas station and try to clean it. So I think that it's also, companies have to do it both ways, right? They have to be out there for their customers, but then they also have to take care of their employees and make sure that they're being, if you want them to be nice to customers and do their job as well as they can, you have to incentivize them to do so.
Yeah. And I know we talked a little bit about it, which is what I strongly believe is you can never have a positive customer experience if you have a negative employee experience. And I totally agree, especially the tools you're giving them, whether it's physical tools of how they clean their vehicles, or if it's, technical tools where how they're being able to access a CRM or their data or whatever that is for the customer. I think that's really important. But I think, is there a way that you've been tying that back where you say, okay, I'm going to start with the UX and CX side. And then how is that, have you found gaps where like, this is why there's an issue because actually the employee experience itself had a challenge? Have you seen that?
The one that's coming up, and it may not hit the mark, but we'll try, is there was an Airbnb for cars. I think it's still around.
Turo. Okay.
So I rented from Turo a couple times and had great experiences. Fantastic. My parents were coming in town. I had a Mini Cooper. That was our only car. So I was like, all right, we're going to rent from Turo because I've had such a great experience. Yeah. And so I get one, I pick it up. It's a fine car. We all go out, these are 70-year-olds. So we're not partying in the car, right? A little bit of sand got in the car. Didn't think that anything was wrong with it. Because we live at a beach and this person's car was at a beach. Returned the car and I ended up getting like $150 fine because they had to wash the car. And I was like, what? And I was like, first of all, the car wasn't dirty and there was sand in it. And I was like, well, was there not supposed to be sand? And so we went back and forth with the Turo customer experience center, and they basically were like, no, this is your fault. And in that particular instance is that I wasn't clear on what the rules were. They had no leniency. And I actually feel like they were taking advantage and they were jerks about it. So I feel like that's where a lot of the breakdown could have been, is lack of communication of what to expect. And in general, customers overtell them what the expectations are because no one likes surprises. So in that particular instance, I felt like the breakdown was that they didn't explain properly to me or to the person who had the car, which then caused this huge breakdown. And now I'm, talking shit about Turo.
Well, I think part of it is being real about brands and understanding that everyone has challenges. If you ask me what brands have delivered a amazing, consistent customer experience, I could probably name 2. Because depending on what product or service you're a part of, it is very rare to see a brand who's very on point, who has crossed over the marketing and care silos with operations to truly deliver experience from the second that you integrate or communicate or become part of that brand to when you leave or maintain with that brand. And it's very rare. I think you have some of the ones like the Ritz-Carlton, some of the ones who get that reputation who actually do a phenomenal job. Like, how can they remember I like Parmesan on my pizza, on my gluten-free pizza, but yet my doctor or one of my airlines can't remember that I'm celiac and they keep giving me meals, or my doctor is like, it's just fascinating to me that you have these instances where you would think some of them who know you actually more intimately than I just come and visit for a few days and leave, that would be able to provide a better experience. But I think it's also just everyone's so busy and just running and chasing, and maybe it's the shiny objects where we aren't always focused at some of those smallest details. And I had a client
But they're not small. That's the thing, right? Is that it gets interpreted as lack of care. That's just what whether it's meant to or not, that's what it's interpreted as.
There was a woman who ran some of the call centers in the Philippines, and she had come to the United States to meet with one of our clients, and we had talked and whatever. And when we got to the Philippines for him to visit there, when we brought him over there, he pulled me aside and he said, "You've won the business. I want to work with you guys, but I want to tell you why." And I said, "Okay." And he goes, "The fact that one of the smallest, I'll give air quotes now, details was that I was drinking Lipton iced tea in the conference room in my hometown. And when I pulled up and walked into your conference room and sat down at the table, she handed me a Lipton iced tea. I don't know if that's like a really popular drink, but I'm assuming not. The fact that I never even had to tell her and she already knew was that small detail makes me feel like if you know that about me, you'll take really good care of my
Yep.
customers.
Yep.
And it's true.
That's
I
a great
mean,
example.
some of the smallest things or things that we deem the
Mhm.
smallest are the things where we know innately, if you care so much to make sure you know or understand me in this, then I know that the big things will hopefully be something that you really pay attention to.
And it does make it personal, right?
Yeah.
So, when you are talking about scaling experiences, 85% you can scale, maybe
Mhm.
even up to 95% you can scale.
Yeah.
And then you've got that small little margin of where you can actually make it differentiated for that particular customer where they're like,
Yeah.
you see me. Like at American
Mhm.
Express, we were doing this test of where customers would apply for a card, and this was an instant approval. It was like a brand new thing.
Mhm.
So would apply for a card digitally, and then they would get instantly approved. And my team was taking that as a handoff for early engagement,
Yeah.
and we would pop up a video that then would say, "Hey, Stephanie,
Mhm.
congratulations on your card." And it would be this whole branded
Yeah.
experience of, and this is when you're going to get your card. This is what you can do with your card, blah, blah, blah. Short, like 50 seconds, something like
Yeah.
that. People loved it. And I
Mhm.
think they loved it for two things. One, said their name.
Yeah.
So little of a detail. We have that
Mhm.
information. Said what product they had,
Yeah.
and then gave them tactical information of when they're going to receive their card. They set their expectations.
Yeah.
We know all that stuff already, but if we put it out in front of them and we understand that it's important to them,
Mhm.
it does make a big difference.
Yeah. I mean, even just hearing your own name alone,
Yeah.
it instantly diffuses you or
Yeah.
makes you like, gives you some of those happy feelings.
Yeah.
Especially, like for me, I'm rarely called Stephanie.
Mhm.
It's usually like mom or something
Yeah.
else. And so it's rare to actually hear my own name,
Yeah.
which I find weird. I'm like, oh, that is kind of a strange thing. But I mean, that would be a delightful thing. Plus also your finances sometimes are getting approved, potentially could have some of that emotional stress.
Yeah.
And then you get to have the celebration and excitement.
And an
following it.
experience.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's an actual experience that you had afterwards, as opposed to just thank you. You'll be receiving your card,
Yeah.
in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Well, one other thing I was going to say too. So you had talked a little bit about marketing and making sure those customer expectations are up front. And I know there's like that documentary on like the Pepsi jet, right? Who they had all the Pepsi points. And if you got so many points, you got your own jet. Yeah.
That was a great story.
Yeah. I was like, what?
Yeah.
And so they never thought he'd actually
Yeah.
attain it. And so it's like also making true like honesty and transparency on those expectations from this is what we're telling you you're going to get versus what you will actually be using it for. So
yeah, no one should have to guess at anything. And the example I think we were also talking about was, go to Vegas, apply for this card and go to Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
That's not true.
Mm-hmm.
You have to apply for the card. You have to get approved for the card. You have to spend the amount of money. You've got to choose to go to Vegas, and you have to book your trip, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not the same thing.
Yeah.
And how I always explained it to all of my CX and UX teams was, my grandma, thank God, is almost 103.
Wow.
Living by herself.
By herself, 103?
She has somebody come in for a couple of hours just to cook for her and stuff.
That's incredible.
I know, she's amazing. If my grandma can't understand it, you need to make it clear.
Yeah.
And she's a smart cookie, but it's part of your job to do that. And I think CX can always have that view, because if you come in as the customer and you're humble about it, you can actually call out a lot of those things that are maybe beyond the edge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I know. And there's a lot of humbling experiences when family starts to I still don't think they fully know or understand. I don't know about yours, what we do.
Yeah.
But they're like, can you tell that person in this, when I called this phone number, and I'm like, oh, okay, like these aren't people that I know, all the people in the world. But I will say it's been really fun to be able to understand, learn a bunch of different cultures and be able to meet people and be able to really get a grasp on just how small the world really is. Yet it's not quite that small that, it's kind of like I have a friend who's a dentist, and if they go to like a party, people will be like, oh my gosh, you're a dentist. And they like open their mouth. I'm like, that has to be really annoying.
Right.
And it's kind of like, I wouldn't say it's the exact same, but with call centers, they're like, oh, you're in these countries, or, oh, are you the people who call me about the car warranties or whatever it is? And so there's always a bad rap, but I just think what's actually underneath is a lot of complexity.
Yeah.
So I even compare or explain to people, if you get a dial tree and it's like an IVR, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't love IVRs, but if you're pushing the buttons, it's because they're getting routed to different places. It could be different countries. It could be different companies. It could be different skill sets. And so there's a lot of complexity that's been built in. And yet a lot of it can be solved in simpler ways.
Yeah.
So it's fun that you bring all the UX, CX combined to help solve some of those things.
It's fun. And it also helps me talk to the UX folks.
Yeah.
Right. Because a lot of times if you come into a design group and you're like, no, I need you to do it like this.
Yeah.
They're like, I know what I'm doing. And they do know what they're doing.
Yeah.
But if you can say, and I actually have done this too, it just helps your case because they're great people, right? UX designers, et cetera. They want to deliver something that's really great.
Yeah.
But a lot of times they're having, competing priorities that are put in their plate. And that can be really confusing to them because who's going to make the call?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, okay. So one last final question for you. So you did trapeze before.
Yes.
And one of the things that we talk about is like staying wild. Like, how do you kind of stay true to, we have our professional personas and things. And I think we've been able to blend those a little bit more professional and personal. But like, what do you do now that you're not doing the trapeze stuff anymore to like stay wild, to have fun, to like, what is it that you do in your personal life to kind of bring that in now?
So I still travel. I've traveled to over 45 countries and huge, that will always be in my life. However, I think it was 2 weeks ago, I bought 2 huge canvases and brought out all my house paint from different projects. And I did a Jackson Pollock thing in my backyard, made a couple huge canvases, and now they're hanging in my office. So that was fun.
That's
awesome. Do more stuff like that.
Yeah. Bring out that creative side.
Yeah.
So what's the best country? I mean, out of the 45, what's your most memorable experience, I should say? Because it's hard to probably choose the top.
It's not hard to choose top, actually. Japan.
Oh, okay.
I love Japan so much. Right next to that would be Stockholm in Sweden. Like I love everything about those cultures. Food's great. People are great. It's clean. It's clever. Like everything you see there, like, how come we don't have that in the US?
Yeah.
So those places I love and want to go back all the time.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being on.
This is such a pleasure.
We really appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll have many conversations coming, hopefully in the future, and maybe we'll figure out where the 46th country is.
Yeah.
Or see you in one of them.
Well, I can't wait to listen to this and all the other episodes.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all for tuning in to CX&Chill with Tina Selwyn. We're really excited about the next episode coming up. We hope you tune in.
And that's our show. CX&Chill is a production of Exo Studios, the creative marketing arm of ExtendOps, with today's host, Stephanie Todd, executive producer, Sean McCreary, producers David Spear, Clarissa Coronado, and Memo Davalos, editors and videographers Carlos Alfonso and Santiago Aguirre, graphic support from Jordan Madrid, and social media guru Claudia Corona. Thanks for tuning in. Check us out next time for more CX&Chill.